The sun was dropping behind the low hills when Daniel turned off the tar road and followed the gravel track along the edge of the reserve. He had taken this route for years after late shifts at the depot, slow enough to watch for cattle that sometimes wandered across. A dark shape moved in the riverbed to his left, where the channel lay dry for most of the year. At first he thought it was a stray cow. Then the shape lifted its head and the outline became unmistakable. A young male lion, lean and long-legged, moving with a stiff, uneven gait. Daniel's foot came off the accelerator. The truck rolled forward a few meters, then he braked and stopped where the track widened. He kept both hands on the wheel and watched through the windshield. The lion limped along the sand and stones, head low, shoulders rising and falling with each breath. It paused, swayed, and took another step. Even from this distance, Daniel could see something wrong around its midsection, a hard line cutting across tawny fur. The lion turned slightly, and the light caught a dull gray curve tight against its belly. Daniel's heart beat hard. Lions were not supposed to be this close to the road, not outside the park fence and not in open view. He glanced at the empty track behind him. He reached for his phone with slow, careful movements, keeping his eyes on the animal. He zoomed the camera until the image shook. The lion took 3 more limping steps and stopped again. Now Daniel could see it clearly. A thick steel wire, twisted like a cable, cinched around the lion's belly. It had cut through fur to raw skin in places, and the flesh bulged on either side as the animal breathed. The wire looked too heavy to be old fencing caught by accident. It looked placed. The lion's tail flicked once. It lifted its head and stared toward the tall grass that grew in a dense strip along the riverbank. Then it looked back toward the road, ears angled forward as if listening. It did not charge. It did not run. It simply stood there, breathing hard, and then took a few more steps in a small circle. Daniel felt the rule in his bones. Do not get out, do not make yourself a target. But he also felt a different pressure, the kind that came when he saw an animal hurt by a human thing. This was not a clean wound. This was a trap. He opened his contacts and tapped the number saved as wildlife emergency, the hotline printed on the signboards near the reserve gate. The call connected on the 3rd ring. A woman answered with a clipped, professional voice. Wildlife response, this is Tandy. There's a lion, Daniel said, keeping his voice low even though the windows were up. Young male. He's on the dry riverbed along the Mvubu track about 5 minutes from the old cattle dip. He's got a wire around his belly. It's tight. Tandy asked him to confirm landmarks, whether the lion was inside the boundary, and whether there were people nearby. Daniel described the bent acacia with the missing branch, the broken culvert, the line of thorn bushes that marked the fence farther north. He told her he was alone in his vehicle at a safe distance. He sent a pinned location. Do not approach, Tandy said. Keep your engine off if you can. Watch from where you are. We have a team on the way. Daniel killed the engine. The sudden quiet made the lion's breathing seem louder, even through the glass. He filmed in short bursts, not for drama, but because details mattered. He watched the lion's pattern. It did not move downriver or upriver like an animal searching for shade. It stayed in a patch no larger than a small football field. It limped toward the grass, stopped, looked into it, then turned back toward the open sand as if pulled both ways. The light faded quickly. Shadows filled the riverbed. Daniel's phone showed the lion in grainy orange and brown. A thin line of blood shone where the wire had bitten in. The lion lowered itself to the sand for a moment, then pushed up again as if the ground hurt too much to rest on. It licked at the wire once, then jerked its head away. Daniel's palms were wet. He kept scanning the edges for another lion. The grass was high enough to hide anything. The fact that this male was alone made him uneasy, not relieved. After what felt like an hour but was probably 10 minutes, the growl of engines carried down the track. Headlights appeared as pale dots through the dust. Daniel exhaled and lifted his hand out the window to signal his position. 2 vehicles approached, a Ranger pickup with a light bar and a second truck with a canopy. They stopped behind Daniel, leaving space. Doors opened softly. A ranger in khaki stepped up on the passenger side of Daniel's truck and crouched low. His name tag read Maziko. He spoke without staring at the lion, his eyes moving across the riverbed. "You called it in?" Maziko asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "He's been circling. The wire is tight. He keeps looking at that grass." Maziko nodded once, then motioned to someone behind him. Two trackers moved forward on foot, rifles slung but pointed down. They stayed on the higher bank, using the slight rise as cover. A vet climbed out of the second vehicle, carrying a dart rifle case and a small pack. Tandy's voice came from the radio on Maziko's shoulder, coordinating distance and wind. The team worked with practice calm. One ranger watched the open riverbed. Another watched the grass line. The vet checked a small wind indicator, then adjusted position so the dart would carry cleanly. The tracker studied the lion's body language, the set of its ears, the tension in its shoulders. The lion stopped and lifted its head higher, noticing the new shapes on the bank. Daniel expected it to bolt. Instead, it took a few limping steps toward the grass again, then halted, turning its head back toward the people as if measuring them. Its sides heaved. The wire gleamed for a second in the last band of light, and Daniel saw how deeply it had cut. The vet raised the dart rifle halfway, then lowered it again. "He's too close to the grass," she said quietly. "If he goes in there and drops, we'll have trouble reaching him." Maziko answered in a low tone, "He wants that grass." As if to prove him right, the lion limped forward, pushing into the tall stems. The grass parted and swallowed its shoulders. For a moment its head remained visible, eyes fixed on something inside. Then it disappeared fully, leaving only a shaking line of stalks and the sound of labored breathing moving deeper into cover. The trackers tensed, and Maziko lifted his hand for silence, for now, and Daniel realized the rescue had only just begun. The grass swallowed the lion, but it did not go far. The stalks shivered in a tight circle, and the heavy breathing stayed close to the river's edge. Maziko crouched and listened, then pointed to a low gap where the grass thinned near a fallen log. The trackers moved first, feet placed carefully on sand and stone so the dry stems would not crack too loud. Daniel stayed by his truck with the engine off and the door locked, watching through the open window. The vet, Dr. Naidu, slid the dart rifle from its case and checked the syringe chamber with a small flashlight that she covered with her palm. She spoke in short phrases, not from fear, but because every extra sound carried. "Young male, thin," she said. "He's stressed. We go light and top up if needed." She handed Maziko a watch and told him to call out time once the dart hit. A tracker raised his hand and froze. Through a break in the stems, Daniel saw the lion's shoulder and the curve of its back. It was standing, not lying down, head low as if it was staring at the ground. The wire line around its belly was visible even in the dim light, a hard band that made the animal look cinched in half. The lion shifted its weight, and its rear leg trembled. Dr. Naidu moved 2 steps to the right to get an angle. She waited for a clear view of the shoulder muscle. The lion turned its head toward the bank. Its eyes caught a reflection from the ranger pickup and flashed pale. For a second, Daniel thought it would charge. Instead, it took 2 limping steps deeper into the grass, then stopped again, still staying in that same small area. "Now," Maziko whispered. The dart rifle made a soft pop. The dart struck the lion's shoulder with a dull thud. The lion jolted, spun, and crashed through the stems in a short burst of panic. The grass shook hard, then the movement slowed. The lion huffed and coughed, circling blind for a moment, then stopping as if it could not decide which way to flee. Maziko clicked his radio twice. "Dart on," he said. "Time." 30 seconds, he called out after a moment, eyes fixed on the grass line. The tracker stayed spread, giving the lion space while watching for a sudden breakout. Daniel could feel the tension in his own shoulders, as if he was the one being hunted. The lion's breathing grew louder then uneven. It tried to step forward and stumbled. Its head lifted, then dipped. It pushed through the stems and emerged into the open riverbed again, but it did not run. It walked in a crooked line, legs stiff, belly held tight, wire biting with each breath. It shook its head hard as if to clear the drug from its senses. Foam flecked its mouth. 1 minute, Maziko said. The lion's front legs buckled. It caught itself, swayed, and stood again. The drug was working, but the animal's adrenaline fought it. Dr. Naidu kept her voice steady. "Don't rush," she said. "Let him go down." The lion lowered to its knees and then rolled onto its side in the sand, chest rising fast. Its tail flicked twice, then lay still. The eyes were open but unfocused. Ears twitched at every small sound. 2 minutes, Maziko said. They moved in with a tight plan. One ranger held a rifle ready but angled down. Another carried a long pole to check response without stepping too close. The trackers approached from behind, staying near the hindquarters where a kick was still dangerous but a bite was less likely. Dr. Naidu knelt by the shoulder and touched the eyelid with the back of a gloved finger. No blink. She placed her hand on the lion's ribcage and counted breaths. "Stable for now," she said. "Work fast." A ranger cut a tarp from the back of the truck and held it up to block the last of the wind. Dr. Naidu pulled out clippers and trimmed fur around the wire where it vanished into swollen skin. Up close, Daniel saw how bad it was. The wire was not thin snare line. It was thick cable, twisted and rust-flecked, pressed deep as a groove. The flesh on either side was raised and raw. In one place a small patch of skin had split and oozed. "Looks like someone tightened it," one tracker muttered. Dr. Naidu did not answer. She slid a blunt probe under the wire to make space, then nodded to Maziko. He handed her bolt cutters and a smaller pair of cable snips. She tested the angle and shook her head. "Too thick," she said. "We cut in 2 places, then we ease it open. Don't pull." They worked with controlled force. The cutters bit into metal with a crunch that made the lion's ear twitch. Daniel held his breath. Dr. Naidu paused, watched the breathing, then continued. The first cut opened a small gap, but the wire still gripped tight. The second cut took longer. When it finally gave way, the tension released suddenly, snapping the ends apart. The lion's body jerked as if struck. Its paws scraped in the sand, its head lifted, eyes widening. The drugged calm shattered. It inhaled hard and tried to rise. "Hold," Dr. Naidu snapped. The trackers stepped back, hands open, keeping distance. Maziko raised the pole to block the lion's head if it lunged. The lion staggered to its feet, not fully awake but awake enough to panic. The wire, now loosened, hung in 2 sharp arcs from its belly. Blood ran in thin lines down its flank. "Sedation's light," Dr. Naidu said. She reached for a second dart, but the lion lurched forward before she could reload. It did not turn toward the people. It dragged itself toward the grass line with a stubborn, straight purpose, front legs pulling, rear legs slipping. The team followed at a safe distance, ready to retreat. Daniel watched, confused, because an injured lion that wanted escape would run away from vehicles, not back into the same patch of cover. The lion pushed into the stems, then stopped and swayed. It took one more step and collapsed on its side right at the edge, half in shade, half in open sand. Its head faced the grass, its nose pressed close to the ground as if searching. A low sound came from its throat, not a roar but a strained, vibrating moan. "Listen," Daniel said before he could stop himself. Everyone went still. From inside the grass came a faint, high cry, thin as a whistle and broken by coughs. The trackers exchanged a look. Maziko's jaw tightened. Dr. Naidu lowered the rifle and reached for her flashlight again, this time letting a narrow beam cut into the stems. The sound came again, weaker, and now Daniel understood why the lion had refused to leave. She signaled the trackers forward, slow and wide. Maziko told Daniel to stay put. The grass moved with something small inside, and the lion's eye followed it, pleading and fierce still. The first tracker eased into the grass on a slow diagonal, parting stems with the back of his hand so they would slide and not snap. Dr. Naidu's flashlight stayed low, sweeping over sand, roots, and flattened patches. The cry came again, thin and broken, and it was not a bird or a hyena. It was a cub. He found it in a shallow pocket under a fallen branch, half covered by dry leaves. The cub was no bigger than a house cat, ribs visible under dust-matted fur. A loop of wire bit into its front leg above the paw, twisted tight and anchored to a hidden stake. The paw was badly swollen and the cub's breaths were quick and shallow. When the light touched its face, it blinked and tried to lift its head, then sagged back down. "Cub," the tracker said. Maziko moved closer to the edge but stopped short. "How bad?" "Snare," the tracker answered. "Leg s compromised." Dr. Nadu moved in, keeping her body low and her path clear of the adult lion's head. The young male lay on his side at the grass line, eyes half open, chest rising hard. Even sedated and bleeding, he held his gaze on the pocket where the cub lay. When Dr. Nadu stepped past him, his ear flicked and his lip lifted slightly, not in attack but in warning. A tracker murmured to him, steady and calm, and the lion's head lowered again. Dr. Nadu knelt beside the cub and traced the wire to the stake. "Dehydrated," she said. "We cut and treat gently." Maziko keyed his radio. "Bring the kit, fluids, blanket, crate." The second tracker slid a gloved hand under the cub's chest to keep it from twisting. Dr. Nadu cut the wire near the stake first to release tension, then loosened the loop a fraction at a time. When it finally fell away, the cub's paw flopped to the sand and blood seeped from a narrow groove. She pressed gauze to the wound. "Hold pressure." She checked the paw pads for warmth and pinched the toes. The cub flinched faintly. "They're still feeling." Behind them, the adult lion made a low rumble, rough from pain. He tried to lift his head again, eyes sharper now despite the drug. He dragged his front paws forward a few inches as if to reach the cub, then stopped when his strength failed. "He's guarding," the first tracker said quietly. Maziko nodded. "He didn't run. He stayed on this patch." The meaning settled over the group in a heavy silence. The wire around the adult had trapped him, but he had refused to abandon the cub that was trapped too. Daniel thought of the lion's earlier looks into the grass, the way it circled and returned, and his stomach tightened. Dr. Nadu examined the cub's leg in the light, turning it a few degrees to see where the wire had bitten deepest. The cut was a clean groove, but the swelling told her the snare had held for hours. She irrigated the line with sterile water, then dabbed antiseptic around the edge, careful not to push grit deeper. A soft bandage went on next, wrapped loose enough to avoid choking circulation. One tracker steadied the cub while another kept his eyes on the adult's head in case the sedation faded suddenly. The cub's breathing eased, its eyes still open. She palpated above the bandage, checking for heat and pulse. The cub's gums were pale, so she rubbed a thin smear of glucose gel on its tongue and waited for a swallow. It shivered, then settled into the cloth, eyes tracking the adult's muzzle. Dr. Nadu told the tracker to keep it low and quiet, and to shield it from sudden light before the long carry back. A ranger brought the kit at a quick walk. Dr. Nadu started an IV for the adult, then injected antibiotics and a long-acting painkiller. "Infection risk," she said. "We keep him shaded and moving." A tarp was raised. One ranger stood on lookout, scanning the grass for any sign of another lion. None came. The cub, freed from the snare, began to crawl in small pulls toward the adult's head, stopping every few inches to pant. "Doctor." Nadu slid a cloth under it and lifted it, supporting the injured paw. The cub's nose twitched. When it was placed near the adult lion's muzzle, the adult exhaled hard and touched the cub's forehead with his nose, a brief contact that looked like a check. The cub made a tiny chirp and leaned into the warmth. The adult's eye closed halfway, and his breathing steadied for a moment. Daniel did not move, but he watched with a stillness he had never felt before. The scene was not gentle or clean. It was pain and exhaustion, but the purpose was clear. The team shifted fast to transport. Dr. Nadu dripped rehydration solution along the cub's tongue with a syringe and wrapped it in a light blanket, leaving its face free. The cub went into a ventilated crate lined with grass. For the adult, they needed to keep him down until he was secured. Dr. Nadu prepared a top-up dose, then paused. "Before we move him," she said, "look at this wire." She pointed to the cut ends lying in the sand. Even under dust, the metal showed fresh, bright scratches as if it had been twisted recently. One end had a clean bend, not the frayed look of old fence. The wire was thick, like cable used for heavy gates. "This wasn't accidental," she said. A tracker crouched and brushed sand away. He found a straight drag line toward a cluster of bushes, and beside it, footprints. "Not old," he said. "Someone was here." Maziko's face hardened. They set the snare, he said, and they tightened the belly wire. Daniel felt cold despite the evening heat. The rescue had become something else. It was no longer only about saving an animal from a wire. It was about people who returned to check it, people who watched and waited. "Get the vehicles closer," Maziko ordered. "We move both now." Dr. Naidu loaded another dart and approached the adult from behind, careful to stay out of his line of sight. She delivered the top-up into the shoulder. The lion's struggle faded, his head sank to the sand. The team slipped a stretcher under him and lifted with coordinated counts, keeping pressure off the abdomen. They carried him to the canopy truck and slid him inside on a padded mat. The crate with the cub went beside him, close enough that the adult's scent could reach it, but secure. Dr. Naidu checked both again, then climbed into the back to monitor breathing during transport. As the engine started, Maziko walked to Daniel's window. "You did the right thing," he said. His eyes stayed on the dark grass. "But don't come back here tonight. Go home." Daniel nodded, throat tight. He watched the convoy roll out with lights low, dust rising in a thin sheet. Behind them, the grass along the riverbank settled, quiet again, hiding whatever else waited in the dark. The boma behind reserve headquarters was built for emergencies, a square of poles, high mesh, and a double gate that could hold a lion long enough for treatment. When the convoy arrived after midnight, the team kept the floodlights off. Only headlamps and a red filter torch guided them as they backed the canopy truck into the fenced bay. Dr. Naidu climbed down first, checked the young male's gums, listened to his chest, and confirmed the IV line still ran clean. The cable had carved a deep groove around his belly. They slid him onto a padded platform and positioned him on his side so fluid could drain away from the worst abrasion. A ranger held a blanket as a windbreak while Dr. Naidu flushed the wounds with warmed saline and painted antiseptic along raw edges. She injected long-acting antibiotics and pain relief, then counted breaths again until the rhythm steadied. The cut cable ends went into an evidence bag for Maziko. The cub's crate was placed in a smaller adjoining pen, close enough for scent and sound but protected from a confused swipe if the adult woke disoriented. The cub's bandaged paw rested on a folded towel. It lifted its head once, gave a faint chirp, then pressed its face against the crate wall as if searching for the adult's smell. Dr. Naidu warmed fluids, fed it in tiny amounts by syringe, and kept it wrapped to hold heat. Outside the fence, Maziko posted 2 rangers and ordered a silent perimeter check. The boot prints by the riverbed bothered him more than the snare itself. Snares happen, but the belly cable was heavy and deliberate. Someone had carried it in, tightened it, and expected time to do the rest. If that person returned, they might not return alone. Daniel drove home with the radio off. He locked his gate and stood in his kitchen replaying the lion's eyes fixed on one spot with stubborn purpose. He slept in short bursts and woke at every dog bark. At dawn his phone rang. It was Tandy. "Both stable," she said. "The cub made it through the night. The male's breathing is good. We cleaned the wounds and started antibiotics. He'll need close monitoring." Daniel's shoulders loosened. "So they'll live." "We're hopeful," Tandy replied. "But we need your footage, the clips you took and the time stamps. Can you come in this morning?" He arrived mid-morning, signed in, and handed over the files. In the operations room, Maziko and 2 trackers stood over a map. A laptop played Daniel's first video frame by frame. On screen, the lion limped in the riverbed, paused, looked toward the grass, then angled his body and returned along the same arc. Maziko stopped the clip and tapped the table. "There," he said. "He keeps doing that, it's not random." Dr. Naidu watched the second clip, the one where the lion dragged himself toward the grass after the cable was cut. "He wasn't fleeing the people," she said. "He was trying to reach what he was guarding. That means the spot mattered and the route to it mattered." Sizwe marked the lion stops on the map and compared them to the team's bodycam footage and the drag marks found near the cut cable. "It lines up like a corridor," he said. "The stake was placed to catch something moving along it." And the belly cable was set, where an animal would be forced to pass. Maziko's jaw tightened. They baited him, he said. They expected him to stay. They planned to return. At first light, a smaller team went back out while the boma stayed guarded. Daniel did not go. Maziko had told him plainly that civilians did not enter an active search. Daniel waited near the office, unable to drive away. The team followed the lion's trail beyond the grass line into a low thicket where the ground turned hard and smooth. Hidden under brush, they found coils of wire, a cut length of cable that matched the belly trap, and a shallow fire pit covered with ash and sand. Nearby were plastic sachets, a battered cooking pot, and the remains of a bait animal's hide. The trackers found boot prints in multiple sizes and dragged branches used to mask the approach. It was a camp, recent and active. Maziko did not rush in. He called the anti-poaching unit, then set camera traps on the approach paths and pulled his people back. "We want the hands," he said, "not just the camp." For 2 nights they watched. Cameras captured shadowed figures returning, carrying bundles and metal. On the second night, just before midnight, the unit moved in from downwind, cutting off the escape line. Daniel learned the details later in careful pieces, because Maziko would not share anything that could compromise a case. The men ran when they saw outlines in the brush. 2 were caught in the thicket. A third tried to reach a waiting vehicle and was stopped on the road. By sunrise, the camp was photographed, wire coils tagged as evidence, and the suspects taken for questioning. The reserve's legal officer prepared statements. Daniel's footage, with its location data and timestamps, was added to the file as proof of when the injured lion was first observed and where. In the boma, recovery moved slowly. The adult lion woke fully that afternoon, confused and furious for a few minutes, then exhausted. He paced a short line, stopped, and lay down again, sides heaving. Dr. Naidu stayed outside the mesh, watching breathing and checking for fever. Each day she cleaned the belly wound, then injected antibiotics and pain relief. By day 4 the swelling softened and the skin edges darkened, like they were finally knitting. The cub, warmed and fed in measured amounts, began to stand, then hobble in small circles inside the crate, testing the bandage with cautious pressure. On the 5th day, the adult lay close to the shared fence and the cub pressed itself against the mesh. The adult breathed out, slow and steady. The cub answered with a soft chirp, and for the first time the sound carried a hint of strength. 2 weeks later, when the wounds had closed and the cub's legs showed good circulation, the team prepared for release. They chose a remote area inside the protected zone, far from roads and known snare routes. Daniel was allowed to watch from a marked distance behind a ranger vehicle, with strict instructions not to move. The crate doors opened. The adult stepped out first, thinner but upright, head high, scenting the wind. The cub followed, smaller and still awkward but moving. The adult paused, looked once toward the tree line, then started forward. The cub hurried after him. Within seconds the grass took them and the savanna swallowed their shapes. Daniel stood very still as the silence returned. The lion had not led anyone like a trained animal or a storybook hero. He had led them by refusing to abandon one small life, by staying on that strip of grass until help arrived, by forcing people to look harder and follow the line. And that line had carried the rangers straight to the ones who set the wire in the first place.